we put together a great district agency compilation for you. I hope you enjoy it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
This is me, Stanley, standing outside the Great District Agency office at night, looking at my phone. Ouch! A mosquito bit me on my arm. They are buzzing all around me. I decided to go for a walk in the nearby neighborhood, not too far from the Great District Agency office. It's an average night out in the city. You can hear the city noise as usual. As I approached their house, I noticed a dark figure of a person standing in the front yard. I decided to be friendly. I said, "Hello." And he said, "Hello." He coughed. His voice sounded like mine. I walked closer to see if I could see the person clearly. The person also walked closer. I see myself standing in the yard, looking at me. You can imagine this freaked me out. I turned around and ran back to the office. It also turned around and ran in the opposite direction. I made it to the office. Tracy and Chris was there. I told them everything that had happened. Tracy said, "Wow." And Chris said, "Let me get this right. You saw yourself and you said hello?" Chris laughed. I said, "Whatever, Chris." Tracy said, "Let us go take a look." I said, "There's a lot of mosquitoes out tonight."
Ouch!
Chris got bitten by one. I said, "Come on, follow me this way." Tracy said, "Those mosquitoes were huge, and it seemed like they were only hanging out over by the office." Chris said, "Yeah, they hurt too." I said, "I saw myself over there." Chris said, "I don't see anyone." Tracy said, "What's that over there?" "That must be the guy you saw, Stanley." Tracy, Chris, and I walked closer. The person also walked closer. We screamed. The person walked into the light. It's Chris, but not Chris. We ran back to the office. We made it back. I said, "Chris, why you didn't say hello to yourself?" Tracy laughed. Tracy said, "It's hot in here." Chris said, "They're working on the air conditioner." I said, "We need to figure out what's happening. Why did I see myself? And why did we see another Chris? But we didn't see another Tracy." Chris said, "Maybe it's a guy thing." Tracy said, "I'm going outside to get some air." Tracy is standing outside.
Ouch!
Tracy was bitten by a mosquito on her hand. Back in the office, I said, "Man, this mosquito bite itch." Chris asked, "Did one bite you too?" I said, "Yep." Tracy walked in. Tracy said, "There are too many mosquitoes out there." Chris said, "Stanley and I were just talking about them." I asked, "Did one bite you?" Tracy said, "Yes." I said, "It also bit me and Chris. Let's go back and see if we can speak to me, Chris." You know what I'm trying to say. We went back. We reached where we saw the last one. We didn't see anything, so we waited. Then we saw a dark shadow coming from the side of the house. We walked closer. This one might come closer like before. As we walked closer, it walked closer. It's Tracy. let me ask it some questions. What's your name? It said, Tracy. I asked, do you live here? She said, no. I asked, where do you work? She said, I work for the Gray District Agency. We looked at each other for a moment. Tracy said, we know everyone at the agency. We don't know you. Then it shook and screamed. It turned into a creature about 4 feet tall and ran off into the dark. We ran back to the office, just in case it came back, since we didn't know what it was. Back in the office, I said, it looked like Tracy this time. I think it has something to do with those mosquito bites, because after I was bit, then my clone showed up, and the same thing happened to both of y'all. I asked Claire, hey, Claire.
Yes.
Check your database for a 4-foot tall creature. It was able to look like all three of us, even down to our clothing. And before we saw our clones, we were bitten by mosquitoes. Claire said,
It's a reptilian that eats mosquitoes and can replicate human beings from the DNA in the blood the mosquito drinks. It also can get the DNA directly from humans by biting them. If it bites you, you are guaranteed to die unless you take the antidote. That's if you survive the attack. It will also eat you to get the rest of its nourishment. It has a keen sense of smell and eyesight. Once it sees you and has your DNA inside its stomach, it can pick and choose whom to replicate and your clothes. It can only hold the replicated form for 15 minutes if it receives your DNA from one mosquito. Still, if it gets a large amount of your DNA, it can keep its shape for a more extended period until it completely digests the blood. Then it turns back to its original form. When it changes into a copy, it has a cough. When it's asked a question about the person, it replicates, and it can't answer the question, it's triggered and changes back to its original form. It can only be captured by stabbing it with a dagger made from the Three Kings kaikamako tree from New Zealand.
I went to go get the dagger and the antidote. Tracy said, Chris, that was weird. She looked just like me. Chris said, yeah, it shocked me too when I saw myself. I wonder how we will get close enough to stab the reptilian with the dagger. Tracy said, how will we find it if it looks like someone? Chris said, why do you always ask me the hard questions? I don't know. Ask Stanley. Tracy laughed. I walked in. I said, it's hanging out in this area because of all the mosquitoes. With some luck, it will stay in this area for tonight. We'll have to get bit up by mosquitoes and hope it turns into one of us or remains in its original form. Tracy and Chris looked at each other, and you could tell they didn't want to get bit up by mosquitoes. We went out in front of the office building, waiting to get bitten. While we were waiting, a guy was walking towards us, coughing. Chris said, that's it right there. I said, we don't know that. I pulled out the dagger just in case. The guy walked on by. The mosquitoes started biting us.
Ouch! 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 Ouch!
We started walking
Ouch.
over towards the house. I sneezed. We waited. A dog came out of nowhere. Tracy and I took off running back towards the office. Chris stood there, and the dog went after Chris. Chris ran, and while he was running, his clone also ran, running right alongside of him. The dog's owner called it. "Sparky, come back here right now." They made it over by us, and the dog turned around and went to the owner. We were shocked. We needed to figure out what to do because we didn't know which one was the real Chris. I pulled out the dagger. Both Chris said, "Wait a minute. What are you getting ready to do?" I thought to myself, should I just guess and stab one? Nah, I can't do that. Tracy asked Chris, "Did Stanley cough when we were walking towards the house?" Chris said, "No, he sneezed." The other Chris started to change. And before I could stab it, it changed back into the creature. Then it went to bite Tracy, which was a mistake. I stabbed it in the head. It worked. The dagger didn't kill it, and it couldn't move. I asked Tracy, "How did you know to ask that question about me coughing?" Tracy said, "It couldn't have known, since it happened after we were bitten by the mosquitoes." Two hours later, we're still waiting. The goat man came out of nowhere, grabbed Chris, and started to drag Chris into the woods. As Tracy, Chris, and I were in the Great District Agency mobile lab, a terrifying report came in over the GDA radio. A monstrous creature, at least 8 feet tall, was roaming the forests of Maryland. The creature was described as standing on 2 legs with dark matted fur covering its body. Its eyes were said to glow a piercing yellow in the darkness of the forest, and it also has long, sharp teeth stained with the blood of its victims. The creature was said to move with fluid grace, almost like it glided through the trees. It was known to prey on livestock, and farmers reported missing animals on a regular basis. Deep in the forest, the bones of the missing livestock were found, with teeth marks that didn't match any known animal. As reports of missing livestock and strange bone discoveries continued to pour in, the people of Maryland lived in a state of constant fear. No one knew when or where the creature would strike next, always looking over their shoulders for any signs of the beast. But the creature was not content with just attacking livestock. It was said to have also taken human lives, leaving behind only mangled corpses and a trail of terror. And the people of Maryland are at the mercy of this terrifying monster, and no one knows how to stop it. I asked Claire, "Did you hear that?" Claire said,
Yes, it's a creature called the Goat Man. The Goat Man is a beast that is said to be a hybrid of a man and a goat derived from a farmer's daughter who is a biophysicist who merged her embryo DNA with a goat's DNA. The Goat Man was first seen in 1957. It's a half-human, half-goat creature that is said to roam the forests and stalk bridges of Maryland. The Goat Man has horns and claws and is swift, agile, tall, and stands upright. It is also said to be very strong and to have human-like intelligence. It also has the ability to communicate with humans. There are 2 known types of the Goat Man. One is a darkish red, aggressive and dangerous, and it is said to attack and kill people who venture into the woods at night. It eats people and animals. There's also a brown one, which is peaceful, benevolent, and helps people that are lost in the woods. It feeds on plants and grasses. There is nothing in the GDA database on how to capture it.
I said, "Well, it looks like we have another case. It's only a matter of time before the creature strikes again. This case may be our most difficult one yet, since the beast thinks like a human." As we drove deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to grow thicker and darker. The road was narrow, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. We arrived at the site of the latest attack. I couldn't believe my eyes! The creature had slaughtered cows, leaving behind nothing but blood and bones. The ground was littered with the remains of dead animals, and the air was thick with the smell of death. We heard a growl coming from the shadows of the trees. We knew the creature was close, and we were terrified. We could hear the creature's growls and howls louder and louder behind us. The whole forest sounds very alive. Chris said, "It looks real creepy out here." Tracy said, "Boo!" Chris screamed. Chris said, "Don't do that." Tracy said, "I was just joking." I asked, "Do y'all remember the case when we caught a 15-foot tarlin?" Chris and Tracy said, "Yeah." I said, "Let's use a cow for bait like we used for the tarlin." Chris said, "We can put the cow in the cage and it will lure the goat man into the cage." Tracy said, That might not work, but I'll go get the bait." Chris said, "I'll get the cage." We set everything up and waited patiently, watching the cow from a safe distance while hiding in some bushes. Chris scared Tracy. I said, "Y'all need to stop playing. It's going to hear you." Tracy said, "Chris's trap is not going to work." Chris said, "We will see." Tracy rolled her eyes. We knew that the goat man was a stealthy and cunning creature, so we had to be careful not to be seen by it. We heard the sounds of the goat man in the distance, coming closer and closer. Finally, the goat man emerged from the forest, and it was the red one. It crept up to the cow slowly, its eyes glowing in the darkness. It looked at the cow for a few minutes and walked away. Tracy said, "See, I told you. It thinks like a human. You can't catch it in a cage." I said, "You're right, Tracy. I have an idea. We can set up a remote control electrical fence that surrounds a 2,000 square foot area. The fence's walls will lie flat on the ground, camouflaged with leaves and branches. When the goat man enters the 2,000 square foot area, I will press the remote, and the fence walls will rise up, connecting together and activating the electricity. As far as the cow goes this time, we will let the cow walk around freely inside the trapped area, so it doesn't look like we put the cow there. When the goat man enters the area with the cow, it won't even realize it's standing in a trap. The cow should stay in the middle of the trap because there's plenty of grass growing that it can eat." We set the trap up. Tracy, Chris, and I hid in the bushes again, waiting for it to return. 2 hours later, we're still waiting. The goat man came out of nowhere, grabbed Chris, and started to drag Chris into the woods. Then the brown goat man appeared. The red goat man let go of Chris and ran into the forest. And the brown goat man also went back into the woods. Chris said, "That thing was gonna eat me. I'm glad the brown one showed up and scared it off." I said, "Chris, you would have been a goner if the brown one didn't help you." Claire said,
"There has been a sighting nearby."
I pulled Claire, the Great District Agency AI, out of my pocket. And Claire said,
"A farmer called in and said a creature tried to get one of its cows. He shot at it and missed, and it ran off back into the woods heading in your direction."
I asked Claire, "Call all the farmers in the area to tell them to lock up all animals in their barns tonight."
"Okay."
Tracy said, "That's good. It wasn't able to get the farmer's cow. Now we know it's hungry and heading this way." I had nervously set up a surveillance camera in the nearby trees. Then I retreated to the safety of the mobile laboratory with Tracy and Chris. As we anxiously huddled around the monitor, we could hear the distinct, bone-chilling cries of the infamous goat man echoing through the darkness. But even within these walls, we couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Suddenly, the sound stopped, and we searched the monitor for any signs of the monster. But all we saw was a peaceful cow grazing in the distance. The goat man began furiously throwing his weight against the lab, causing the walls to shake and rattle with terrifying growls. Just as suddenly as it began, it stopped, leaving us with only the sound of its heavy breathing and the pounding of our own hearts. Then we heard the banging on the side of the lab again, as if the goat man was trying to break in. Then it went silent again. Chris asked, "Stanley, it can't get in here, can it?" I said, "No, the lab is reinforced with a rare metal recovered by the GDA from a crashed UFO." Tracy said, "There it goes, it's in the trap." I quickly pressed the button on the remote. Then we went to go take a look.
Let me out of here!
The goat man screamed and growled. At last, we caught the goat man.
No, not Chris!
The entity came from around the corner and grabbed Chris.
Deep within the bowels of the Burcrum County building lies a terror beyond imagining. It is said that an entity, or perhaps a group of creatures, lurks in the dark corners of the back rooms, waiting to prey on unsuspecting victims who wander too close. One entity in particular is made of something far more sinister than flesh and bone. The creature seems to come to life from a black substance resembling mold around the back rooms. A man died from an unknown blood infection while working in the back rooms. The black substance started to cover his deceased remains and mixed with his blood. This extremely hostile entity feeds on humans that dare cross its path. Async research that studied this entity had called the Great District Agency to capture it. Unsure of what they're up against, Stanley, Tracy, and Chris, three of the agency's top investigators, have been dispatched to the Burcrum County building to confront this abomination head-on. Stanley, Tracy, and Chris arrived at the Burcrum County building suited up in their hazmat suits.
Tracy said, "This place gives off really bad vibes." I said, "Let's start looking around and be careful of any mold-like substance we may come across."
Help me!
Our hearts stopped at a sound of a child's voice piercing through the eerie silence,
Help me!
beckoning for help from a distance. The chilling cry echoed through the darkness,
Help me!
sending shivers down our spines as we strained to locate the source of the desperate plea.
Help me!
But the voice seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once,
Help me!
surrounding us in an otherworldly presence. Fear consumed us as we realized that something sinister lurked in the shadows,
Help me!
luring us towards its grasp with the innocent voice of a child.
Help me!
Our minds raced with the terrifying possibilities of what awaited us. But we knew that we had to push through the fear and find the source of the chilling call for help.
Help me!
I said, "Someone needs help. What direction did it come from?" Tracy said, "It echoed off the walls. There's no way to tell where it came from." Chris said, "Look, a human head!" Tracy screamed, and Chris began to shake with a horrified look on his face. I said, "I wonder where's the rest of the body?" "Come on, let's keep looking for this kid." We delved deeper into the twisting corridors of the back rooms. You can hear the hum of the fluorescent lights, and they often flicker on and off.
Help me!
We heard the child again.
Help me!
Tracy said, "The cries for help is coming from just ahead of us."
Help me!
We kept walking as someone saying "help me" gets louder and louder.
Help me! Help me!
We see a boy standing there, terrorized, looking at us, saying "help me."
Help me! Help me!
A spine-chilling sensation crept up our backs as we heard a faint rustling behind us. We whipped around, hearts pounding, but there was nothing there. We turned back around, our eyes widened in horror as we realized the young boy we had seen was nowhere in sight. Suddenly, Chris began to tremble uncontrollably. His teeth started chattering in fear. Chris said, "Where did he go?" Tracy said, "I don't know. He was just standing there. He just disappeared. There is nowhere he could have went that fast." I asked Claire, the GDA AI. "Claire, can you give me some information about the Bearcrumb building, specifically the cries for help in the back rooms?" Claire said,
Visitors of the Bergcrum building that wander into the back rooms often see and hear strange things, especially children crying for help that is not actually there. The cries are used to lure the unsuspecting visitor closer to getting massacred by the entity.
We heard a noise of its malevolent presence lurking just out of our sight, and we realized we may have bitten off more than we can chew. I said, "It feels like we're being watched and followed. The noises are getting closer and closer, coming from all directions." We began looking all around so nothing sneaks up on us. Chris turned around facing the opposite direction from where we are heading and started walking backwards, keeping up with us.
As they moved further into the labyrinth depths of the Bearcrumb building, they began to realize that they may not make it out alive. The creature is getting smarter with every passing moment.
Chris said, "Let's call it a day and tell Async Research we didn't find anything." Tracy said, "Chris, are you trying to get us fired?" Chris said, "No, I'm just trying to stay alive." Tracy said, "Chris, you know what we signed up for. Let's get to work." We heard a noise that startled us, and we didn't know where it was coming from.
Will Stanley, Tracy, and Chris be able to find and capture the creature and put an end to its reign of killings? Or will they become its next victims, trapped forever in the twisted, nightmarish world of the back rooms?
I said, "I hope we don't get lost in this place." Suddenly, something ran by the doorway. I said, "Did y'all see that?" Tracy said, "I saw something. I'm not sure what it was." Chris said, "Yeah, I saw it too." I said, "You know what we have to do? Let's go take a look." We walked through the doorway that leads to another section of the building, which looks identical to the area we just left. We stood there and looked in both directions. We see something at the end of the room, peeking around a corner and staring at us. At least we think it is. It doesn't have any eyes. Chris said, "Well, let's go check it out." It emerged from around the corner of the doorway and screamed right where we were standing. We turned around and ran for our lives. It chased after us. It was screaming and we were screaming. We ran and ran. It finally stopped chasing us, and we made it back to the doorway of the back rooms. I asked Tracy and Chris, "Do y'all have any ideas on catching this thing?" Chris said, "All three of us can jump it and hold it down and tie it up."
No, not Chris!
The entity came from around the corner and grabbed Chris. I went to help Chris. It hit me in the chest, and I went flying backward, and it ran off with Chris screaming. I said, "That thing is strong." Tracy said, "We can't jump that thing." I said, "We need to go find Chris." Tracy and I went looking for Chris. We found Chris in a corner crying. Tracy asked Chris, "Are you okay? How did you get away?" Chris said, "I'm okay. I was able to break loose from his grip, and I ran as fast as I could, turning corners so fast I got lost in this darn place." I said, "Get up, Chris. We can't jump that creature. It's too strong." Tracy said, "I can contain it by levitating it up into the air with one of my spells and holding it long enough for the Gray District Agency's containment unit to arrive." Chris said, "I really hope this works." Tracy said, "It might." Chris said, "Huh? It might?" Tracy said, "It's not guaranteed to work on this entity." I said, "Okay, but let's wait for it to find us this time."
Help me!
The cries for help began again.
Help me!
Chris said, "It must be nearby." I said, "Tracy, are you ready?" Tracy said, "Don't worry, I got this." The creature came from around the corner, running straight towards us, screaming. Tracy said, "Y'all stand back." Tracy locked in on the creature. Tracy said,
Maleficus negotio.
Tracy has the entity levitated in midair. It's screaming and flailing its arms and legs uncontrollably. Tracy struggled to maintain control. The entity began to break free from her grip, descending ominously back towards the ground. But Tracy was not ready to give up so easily. With all her strength, she uttered another spell.
Ingori Helai.
The entity was thrust back into the air, struggling to break free. It was a terrifying battle for control, but in the end, Tracy emerged victoriously, the entity once again under her command. Tracy, Chris, and I breathed a sigh of relief. We had faced our fears and triumphed over the terror that lurked in the back rooms. The creature we had captured may have been defeated, but there are surely others in the back rooms, waiting to prey on unsuspecting victims. We knew that our work was never truly done, and that we would always be fighting against the darkness that lurks in this world.
Help me!
This is an episode of the Great District Agency on Storytime Flix.
One late night, Tracy was at the Great District Agency office. The shrill ring of a telephone cut through the silence in the office. Startled, she hastily picked up the receiver.
Hello?
Her heart pounding with anticipation. A trembling voice reached her ears that belongs to a young girl named Lauren. Lauren cried out,
Help! You won't believe what's happening. It's Amanda. She's after me.
Tracy's eyes widened. Lauren said,
Amanda killed my cat. And after that, things started getting strange. I saw a talking sheep, and the sheep told Amanda she was wrong for doing that.
Tracy's grip on the phone tightened up. How could such a thing be possible? She had heard of strange occurrences before, but never something as bizarre as a talking sheep. She then mustered up the courage to ask,
Lauren, are you safe?
Lauren's voice wavered, heavy with fear.
Help! Amanda is after me!
The line went dead. Tracy's heart raced, her mind in turmoil. She had to do something, and fast. Tracy called the cops. The next day at the office, Tracy told Chris and Stanley about what happened. Chris said,
The cops should be able to handle it.
Stanley said,
I don't know about that. They would freak the heck out when they see a talking sheep.
Tracy couldn't bear the uncertainty any longer. With a determined glint in her eyes, she contacted the police, seeking answers about Lauren's well-being. Anxiety gnawed at her as she listened to the officer on the other end of the line. The officer said,
We questioned Amanda, but we didn't find anything strange. Lauren seems to have vanished without a trace, though.
Tracy's heart sank in disbelief, mingling with fear. How could this be? Was it possible that Amanda had hidden her sinister intentions from the authorities? Stanley's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts.
We should check it out, Tracy, especially since Lauren mentioned a talking sheep.
A shiver ran down Tracy's spine as she considered his words. Tracy said,
Okay, let's go.
Chris said,
Dang, Here we go again.
The agents arrived at the farm. Stanley said,
It looks like the farm is also a petting zoo.
Tracy said,
Ew, I smell something awful.
Chris said,
It's a farm, Tracy. It's going to stink.
Tracy said,
I know it's a farm, but I'm smelling something rotting like a body.
Stanley said.
Yeah, I smell it too.
They walked further across the farm. Stanley said,
The smell is getting stronger. Look over there. There's a mound of dirt.
Tracy said,
Oh, my. It smells horrible over here.
Chris said,
Look, something is sticking out of the dirt mound, with flies buzzing all around it.
Stanley said,
It looks like it's a dead cat, rotting away.
Tracy, Stanley, and Chris stood frozen, their eyes locked on the ominous dirt mound. The silence in the air was suffocating, as their imaginations ran wild with terrifying possibilities. Is Lauren, the missing person, buried beneath that mound of earth? Their eyes widened in terror. Stanley, with a quiver in his voice and his trembling finger pointing at the mound. Stanley said,
Chris, dig through the mound, and Tracy and I will head over to the house.
Chris stuttered.
But what if I uncover Lauren's lifeless body in there?
His body trembled as he fought to steady himself. Stanley's voice turned grave as he replied, his words hang heavy in the air. Stanley said,
Chris, check this out. If you uncover the truth, you'll have unrevealed a fragment of this nightmarish puzzle. Once you're done, meet us at the house. Man.
Chris sucked his teeth in disappointment. Inside the kitchen, Amanda and Wooly are standing there. Then Amanda runs off just before the team walks in. Wooly is left there standing. Stanley said,
There's the sheep.
The sheep said,
Hi, my name is Wooly. You should not be here.
Wooly whispered, just as Chris walked into the room. Chris said,
What in the world? I see y'all found the talking sheep. By the way, there wasn't anything else in that dirt mound.
Hidden in a nearby room, you could hear Amanda saying,
By yell, by yell, by yell. By man, by man, by man. A lamb, a lamb, a lamb.
The lights went out. It was pitch black in the room. The lights came back on, and Wooly is gone, and Chris is nervously shaking. Tracy said,
Where did Wooly go?
Stanley said,
Yeah, I don't know.
Chris said,
Do you think that was Amanda's voice?
Tracy said,
Could be. I wonder if she grabbed Wooly.
Stanley said,
Tracy, Chris, did you notice the eyes on the fridge and the stove?
In a nervous voice, Tracy and Chris said,
Yes.
Stanley said,
Let's see if they could tell us something. Hey, fridge, stove, do you know where Amanda is?
The refrigerator letters started to move slowly. And it spelled attic. And the stove looked up towards the ceiling. There's a bump on the ceiling. Stanley said,
Let's find the attic door.
The agents climbed up the rickety ladder to the attic, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Stanley whispered,
Keep your guard up, everyone. We don't know what we're up against.
Tracy said,
Did anyone bring a flashlight?
Chris said,
No. Let me see if I can find a light switch.
Chris found the light switch, and the agents looked around. Stanley noticed something on the floor. Stanley said,
What's that on the floor? It's a VHS tape.
Tracy said,
Look, there's a TV with a VCR player built in.
Stanley pressed play, and Amanda appears on the screen. Amanda said,
Get out of my house right now!
The TV turned off. Chris said,
Guys, maybe we should listen.
Stanley said,
Normally we would, Chris.
Chris said,
I know. It's our job. We have to stay.
The TV turned back on, and Amanda was on the screen, and she started saying,
By Yale, by Yale, by Yale. Hi man, hi man, hi man. Ba-lam, ba-lam, ba-lam.
Stanley's eyes widened in disbelief. Stanley said,
Did she say a spell?
Tracy nodded, and her voice filled with determination. Tracy said,
It seems that Amanda has been dabbing in dark sorcery. I think this is what she was saying when Wooly disappeared. We need to put a stop to her madness right now.
Stanley said,
Did you hear that? It sounds like it came from the kitchen. It could be Amanda. Let's go to the kitchen.
An eerie silence enveloped the air. The agents cautiously entered the kitchen. Their senses heightened. They nervously glanced around, their eyes darting from one side of the room to the other. Stanley said,
Look, a lady is laying on the floor in a puddle of blood.
Tracy said,
Guys, she's not breathing.
Wooly walked into the room. Wooly said,
I told you, you should not be here. Wooly? 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 Where are you?
Amanda started calling for Wooly, and Wooly took off running. Stanley said,
Wait, Wooly, I have some questions.
Wooly kept running. Chris said,
Shouldn't we be running right behind him?
Stanley said,
Believe me, Chris, my instincts are telling me to run too. But we can't. We need to find out what's going on.
Amanda walks in with a knife in her hand, and Chris starts shaking. Amanda said,
Why are you still in my house?
Chris said,
What did you do with Lauren?
Amanda said,
That's not answering my question. Didn't I tell you to get out of my house?
The lights went out.
Help!
The lights came back on. Amanda is gone, and Chris is gone.
No, not Chris!
They heard a thump over their heads. Stanley said,
Let's go up to the attic.
Stanley and Tracy finds Chris tied up to a post with tape on his mouth. Stanley takes the tape off of Chris' mouth and unties him. Chris said,
Amanda is behind you!
Amanda stood there with a devilish grin, still holding the knife. Tracy jumped into action to protect the crew. She started a binding spell. Tracy said,
Mirificus negotium.
It didn't work. Amanda jumped down through the attic door. Stanley turned to Chris.
Chris, stay here and keep an eye on the attic. Tracy, check the kitchen, and I'll check outside on the farm.
Chris said,
Y'all hurry up and come back now. If you hear me hollering, you better come running.
Tracy is in the kitchen. She noticed the lady's body is missing. Tracy asked the refrigerator and the oven.
Have you seen Amanda or Wooly?
The letters began to move again. It said, no. Stanley is out on the farm, but he doesn't see anything. Chris is still in the attic shaking, but no sign of Amanda or Wooly. Stanley and Chris meet with Tracy in the kitchen. Stanley said,
We can't seem to find Wooly or Amanda.
Wooly walks in, his woolly form radiating warmth and innocence. He approached the team with a sheepish voice. Wooly spoke.
Amanda got lost in her own darkness, but she didn't mean to cause harm. We can help her find redemption.
Amanda's laughter echoed. She's somewhere in the house. Amanda said,
You're too late. Lauren is long gone, and you'll never find her.
Willie runs out of the kitchen. Tracy's eyes blaze with determination. Tracy said,
We won't let you get away with your wicked schemes, Amanda.
Stanley stepped forward with his firm voice.
Amanda, your reign of darkness ends now. Release Lauren and face the consequences.
Chris said,
Yeah, what they said. How are we going to catch her?
Stanley said.
I have an idea.
Stanley asked the refrigerator.
How are you alive? Did Amanda create you?
The letters began to move on the refrigerator. It spelled yes. Stanley said,
I know what we can do. We could catch her with the help of the refrigerator and oven.
Tracy said.
How?
Stanley said.
We could push her food to the back of the fridge, where she would have to lean in, and the fridge would do the rest by closing its door and locking her in. And the oven will alert us with its timer. She won't be able to get out because the fridge has the same magical power she has.
Tracy said.
I will set up the fridge.
Stanley said.
Okay, Chris and myself will head up to the attic and listen for the oven to set off its timer. Come up when you're finished.
Tracy said.
Okay.
Stanley and Chris are in the attic. Then Tracy walked in. Tracy said,
It's done. All we have to do is wait for the timer to go off. What? The timer just went off!
The team quickly runs back to the kitchen. They did it. They caught Amanda. The refrigerator is jumping up and down as Amanda is trying to get out. Amanda said,
Let me out of here! I'm going to kill you all!
Amanda was transported to the GDA containment site. Lauren was later found unharmed, and Willie was nowhere to be found. Stanley, Tracy, and Chris, investigators of the Gray District Agency. They're tasked with capturing a sinister animatronic known as Freddy Bear, lurking within the abandoned Freddy Bear's pizzeria. Reports showed that an animatronic caused the demise of people wandering into the abandoned pizzeria. At the GDA's office, Tracy couldn't help but research the history of Freddy Bear's pizzeria, hoping to uncover the secrets that bound him to the place. She asked Claire, the GDA's AI.
Claire, what is the backstory of Freddy Bear at the Freddy Bear's pizzeria?
Freddy, an animatronic bear and beloved children's entertainer, resides at Freddy Bear's Pizzeria. He proudly serves as the cherished mascot of the original Freddy Bear's Pizza franchise, captivating audiences with his singing talent as he commands the center stage. However, unbeknownst to most, Freddy's existence is marred by a haunting past. He is tormented by the vengeful spirits of children who met a tragic end at the hands of a man named William Afton within the pizzeria. These innocent souls now linger within Freddy, compelling him to seek retribution against their assailant by unleashing his blind rage upon any adults who dare enter the pizzeria after closing hours.
They arrived at the decrepit Freddy Bear's pizzeria, shrouded in darkness and decay. They cautiously entered the abandoned restaurant. Tracy whispered.
This place feels cursed.
Chris replied.
Everything about this place is creepy.
Oh no!
The team hears a distant scream for help. Stanley said.
Sounds like that scream came from just ahead of us.
Tracy asked.
Hello? We're here to help. Where are you?
They discover a gruesome scene on the floor. Chris said.
Look, tomato sauce is on the floor.
Tracy sighed.
I don't think that's tomato sauce.
Stanley, Tracy, and Chris' mouth hung open in horror, staring at the red substance on the floor. Stanley implied.
Maybe the red body fluids came from the voice we heard screaming. Come on, let's keep looking.
They ventured deeper into the haunted pizzeria, encountering eerie sounds. They cautiously scanned their surroundings, never knowing what might try to get them. Tracy asked,
Chris, do you see anything?
Chris is frozen in fear. He didn't say anything. Tracy and Stanley turned around and saw Chris just standing there, his eyes filled with horror. Stanley asked Chris,
What are you doing, Chris?
Chris whispered.
Look over there.
They spotted a shadowy figure. Stanley whispered.
What is that?
Tracy answered.
I see something, but I'm not sure what I see.
Stanley said.
Let's get a little closer.
They proceeded to walk closer. Stanley said,
It's Freddy!
Fear grips them as they screamed and turned and ran. Freddy in hot pursuit, his malevolent, distorted laughter echoing through the pizzeria. Chris shouted,
We can't let it catch us!
Stanley and Tracy ran by Chris. Chris yelled,
Stanley, Tracy, wait for me!
They raced through the darkened pizzeria until they stumbled upon a small security control room with CCTV monitors showing rooms and hallways in the pizzeria. The room has 2 doors, one on one side and one on the other. Stanley said,
We need to find a way to capture him before someone else get hurt.
The team started thinking of ideas to capture Freddy. Suddenly they seen Freddy on one of the monitors. Freddy is staring right into the camera. Freddy uttered,
I've been waiting for you.
Freddy Bear's deep, menacing growl caused fear in their hearts. Freddy yelled,
You can't escape me!
Freddy moved away from the camera. Chris said,
I can't think of anything on how to catch him.
Freddy is standing in the doorway, and Stanley quickly pressed the red button that said close.
No.
The door closed. In desperation, Stanley spotted a series of rusted chains hanging from the ceiling. Stanley said,
I can use the chains to tie up Freddy. Tracy, do you think you could cast a spell to hold him long enough for me to put the chains on him?
Tracy said.
Yes, I could do it.
She performed the spell.
Petromortem evixis.
Tracy has Freddy contained. Chris opened the door. Stanley struggled to put the chains on Freddy as he tries to break free. With his adrenaline pumping, he managed to wrap the chains around the mechanical monster, restricting his movements. Freddy shouted,
You cannot contain me forever!
Chris is scared and shaking. Chris cried out.
Now what?
Tracy knew they only had moments before the animatronic broke free. Tracy shouted,
I'm going to send him straight to the GDA's containment unit, where he can't harm anyone.
She concentrated on her magic, conjuring a mystical portal right beneath his feet.
Backdoor dispersion.
And the room fell silent. Stanley said,
We did it. We caught Freddy.
Freddy managed to break out of the chains and escape the portal. He ran off deep into the pizzeria with the ominous laughter echoing through the pizzeria as he disappeared into the shadows, shouting,
I will return.
Stanley yelled.
And we will catch you.
The agents were shocked that Freddy was able to escape. They decided to head back to the office until they figured out a way to capture him. 2 weeks later at the GDA's office, they found out that a demolition crew was attacked at the pizzeria and ended up in body bags. Tracy asked Claire, the GDA's AI,
Claire, what can we possibly do to catch Freddy?
It is said that there is a book of spells in the pizzeria that can control Freddy and remove him from the pizzeria. But the spell must be performed by a witch and a non-witch.
Stanley said,
We need to go back so we can find that book. I will perform the spell with you, Tracy.
Chris said,
Man, do we have to go back?
The team returned to the pizzeria on a stormy night. As they ventured deeper, the pizzeria seemed different, as if it had come more alive. Stanley led the way, guided by Tracy's magical senses, and Chris followed closely behind. They reached the control room where they had previously encountered Freddy. Freddy's voice echoed from the shadows. Freddy said,
I've been waiting for you. You shouldn't have returned.
Chris said,
I knew this was a bad idea to come back to this place.
Freddy is standing in the doorway. Freddy shouted.
You can't escape your fate.
Stanley spotted the spell book just in the nick of time. Stanley whispered,
This is the book.
As Freddy pressed closer, Tracy and Stanley frantically recited the incantations from the book.
Itioko Karadium. Itioko Karadium. Itioko Karadium. Itioko Karadium.
The room shook. Then Freddy convulsed, his voice distorted in agony. Chris ran off screaming. Stanley shouted,
It's working! Keep going!
Tracy has control of Freddy's spirit. Tracy said,
Mirificus Negutium.
Tracy sent his spirit to the GDA's containment unit. And Chris came back. Chris stuttered.
Did we catch him?
Tracy sucked her teeth, and she said,
We didn't catch anything. Stanley and I caught him.
As they leave the cursed place behind, they couldn't help but wonder what other horrors lay in wait, ready to be uncovered in the shadows of Freddy Bear's Pizzeria. In the dimly lit Gray District Agency office, the investigators, Stanley, Tracy, and Chris, gather around the office desk, their eyes fixed on a dossier detailing a gruesome case of loss of lives. A malicious beast born from nightmares savagely unalived two unsuspecting men during a treacherous hunting expedition deep within the heart of the Minnesota's North Woods. Witnesses whispered a creature with antler-like horns, his eyes burning like sulphurous flames, and his grotesque claws thirsting for more flesh, standing at an unnatural height of 7 feet tall. Stanley asked Claire,
Claire, can you narrow down what this could be using the case files?
According to the Gray District Agency's database, there's a 95% chance that it's a Wendigo. A Wendigo is a beast-like humanoid creature that possesses people when they give into taboo practices, like greed, excess, and particularly cannibalism. While scholars believe that the Wendigo began with the first humans. Wendigos are said to be cursed to wander the land, eternally seeking to fulfill their voracious appetite for human flesh. The creature is said to have several powers, such as the Wendigo's senses of sight, smell, and hearing are greatly enhanced, comparable to those of many predatory animals. The Wendigo can see clearly in total darkness. As the Wendigo grows older, its powers over nature increase exponentially. Wendigos are incredibly strong, even by monster terms. They can tear humans limb from limb, snap necks and carry 2 people at once, and even drag them up a tree with ease. They are considered to be among the strongest of creatures. Also, they have the power of immortality. Wendigos can heal rapidly from any wound that is not caused by fire or a magical weapon containing silver.
An unsettling silence settles in the room as the agents exchange weary glances, knowing that they are facing a malevolent entity born from the darkest aspects of human nature. It causes the agents to become very nervous. Stanley said,
We have some silver-tip arrows. Tracy, can you conjure up a spell for the arrows so they can only weaken the Wendigo?
Tracy replied.
Yes, I could do that.
Stanley explained.
Once it's weakened, I will have a chance to contain it. Let's grab the bow and silver-tip arrows and head into the North Woods.
Tracy went to go cast her spell. Chris said,
Why the arrows and not the fire?
Stanley replied.
The arrows are more stealthy and not so hazardous.
Tracy came back and asked Chris,
Chris, are you coming? If we don't stop this Wendigo, who will?
Chris replied.
Okay, I'm in. But just so you know, I'm scared out of my mind.
Please subscribe, like, and share this video with your friends. The agents armed themselves with bows and silver-tip arrows. They set out into the frigid, snow-covered wilderness. Stanley said,
This is where it was last seen.
Chris said,
It's freezing out here. We forgot to bring out warm clothes.
The forest seems to tighten around them. Evil hangs heavy in the air, igniting a primal fear deep within their souls. Chris screamed. They hear something large running through the snow. Tracy said,
Chris, it's just a deer.
Chris asked,
Are we sure about this? I mean, this Wendigo is like huge and wicked. And to top it off, it eats people.
The atmosphere thickens as the group continues into the forest. The moon is sitting behind dark clouds, casting eerie shadows across the dense trees. Stanley replied to Chris,
Chris, we could do this. We're members of the Gray District Agency.
Chris replied,
You're right. Let's do this.
The agents pressed on. Suddenly, Stanley crouches down, examining a set of strange footprints. Stanley said,
Look at these footprints. They're huge and oddly shaped. I'm not sure what animal left these.
Chris mentioned,
I used to track and hunt with my uncle, and I don't know what those prints come from.
Tracy said,
We must be close. Keep your head on a swivel. The Wendigo is probably watching us right now. Come on, let's go.
The agents proceeded on. Chris said,
Did y'all hear that? There's something moving over there.
Stanley whispered,
Be quiet, Chris. We don't want to scare it off. Y'all stay ready.
The forest is alive with tension. Each eerie sound causes them to get nervous. They spotted a glimpse of a massive, hairy figure moving through the trees. Tracy said,
That's the Wendigo.
The forest seems to hold its breath as the trio watches in horror. Stanley whispered,
Take a shot now.
The agents missed, and the Wendigo ran off. Chris said,
It's not as scary as I thought it was.
Stanley mentioned,
It's only because it was far away from us. You couldn't really see its flesh-thirsty fangs and ferocious eyes and large claws.
Chris looks worried. Tracy said,
Stanley, are you trying to scare Chris?
Stanley answered,
I'm just messing with him. But we are going to have to get closer to make the shot without getting eaten.
The team went further into the forest. Chris screamed. A deer ran between the trees. Stanley said,
Chris, calm down. It's just another deer. Let's keep going. There's a clearing just ahead of us.
The agents stumbled upon a clearing. The moon hung in the sky, casting an eerie glow on the landscape of jagged rocks. Stanley said,
Look, there's a cave over there. It must be living in that cave. What is that?
Tracy said,
I think you're right, Stanley. That scream came out of that cave.
In an instant, the Wendigo is standing at the mouth of the cave, but he doesn't see the GDA agents. Chris is so scared, he wets his pants. And the Wendigo went back into the cave. Stanley asked Chris.
Dang, Chris. It scared you that bad?
Chris replied.
Yeah, that's so embarrassing. And I didn't bring another pair of pants. Now I'm really gonna freeze.
Tracy said.
We're family, Chris. We're not gonna tell anyone. But you're still gonna freeze.
Stanley asked Chris.
Chris, go over there and draw it out of the cave.
Chris said.
Man, what? That's crazy. I'm not going over there.
Stanley replied.
Chris, don't worry. We will protect you.
Chris said.
What if you miss? Then what?
Stanley answered.
If we miss, we will light as many arrows as possible, and the fire will scare it away.
Chris said.
If it comes down to that, y'all better light this whole forest on fire to stop that thing from eating me. All right, I'm gonna go do it.
Chris walked near to the cave. He mumbled to himself.
Man, why I always have to be the bait? Anyways, what am I supposed to do to get this thing to come out of the cave?
Chris stood there looking at the cave. Chris said,
Hello? Hello? Man, this is so jacked up.
They came running out of the cave, straight for Chris. It was then that Tracy and Stanley, brave yet scared, raised their bows and aimed their arrows at the creature. The tension hanging heavy in the air as the agents focused on the Wendigo. Tracy and Stanley fired upon it. It's a direct hit. The Wendigo fell to the ground. Chris came back. Chris said,
I'm not doing nothing like that again.
The GDA containment unit retrieved the Wendigo and transferred it to an unknown location called the Gray Area.